right, well, welcome to the, double edition, Week 5, Week 6 podcast. We do apologize. Life gets in the way sometimes, and we couldn't find the time to talk about our Week 5, but we're going to touch base on a few things here before we get into our Week 6 and prep for Week 7. So, as always, it's me, your commish, and we have somebody on the phone, and I think you know who he is, but he's going to say hi to you anyway. Randy, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How's everybody here?
Oh, good. Yeah, we had a little fantasy shindig there, and we'll touch base on that a little bit. But you know what? We're kind of on the hot seat for time here, so why don't we just recap Week 5 as best we can, and then we'll kind of smooth into Week 6.
Let's get going.
All right. Well, Week 5, as you know, we're going to talk about the matchup of the week. And I'm just going to start it off. So again, this is Week 5 highlights quickly. I thought the matchup of the week that week was Clueless versus Man Bear Pig.
Yep, I agree.
So I got a 1.16 point separation. Obviously, we all know Clueless won. It was the battle of Andrew Luck versus Brady. They did play each other, New England versus Indy. And it's unfortunate because Jerry actually benched Brady to play Goff. The Rams were playing Seattle. I can see maybe where he was at. I mean, the Rams are now 6-0. Yeah, he plays Brady. He would have won that matchup easily. Also, Jerry's kicker Robbie Gould, he let him down too. I think he had minus half a point. So that's not good either. Obviously, when you're in that close matchup. And Clueless, basically lucky to survive that one, and I think Allen's even admitted that as well. But Luck played good that matchup to get him that win. So that was my matchup of the week. Sounds like you had it, but do you want to touch base on what your notes were?
Yeah, especially just, like you said, that it was so close, and, Michael Thomas, 7.4 points on Monday Night Football, that put him over the top. I always like it when the Monday night game is... makes a matchup worth watching, as we saw there the other day. A bunch of us that went out and watched the game. It was nice to have some games still being decided on Monday night. And yeah, you touched base on it too about Goff. I know you've mentioned it many times too about playing divisional games will often give certain players a boost. Now it's all that might be part of Jerry's thinking in putting Goff in, but unfortunately it gave the Seattle defense a boost, and they ended up playing pretty good. Obviously, the Rams still found a way to win, but it was much more of a nail-biter than I'm sure Jerry wanted, especially in a fantasy situation.
For sure. So, we're not going to go into too many deals as we normally do, but we just thought we'd highlight the good things of Week 5. The bad things, I think, if you were involved in it, well, you've lived it. So, Randy, who was your player of the week for Week 5?
Well, my player of the week was in this matchup as well. It was Isaiah Crowell from Man Bear Pig.
Okay.
I know we've talked about him a few times here, usually as a bust, but at least on that week 5, he had 29.1 points, kind of came out of nowhere, over 200 yards and a touchdown against a good Broncos defense at the time. He was only projected 8.3 points. He did pretty well. Jerry had an off game from Goff, as we said, and Gould, and the Broncos defense in general, but this performance made it close, gave him a real shot at it.
Well, yeah, Crowell has kind of been kind of that some would call a sleeper, but he's done quite well for himself and fantasy owners alike. If you took him late, which most probably did, I could see that. For me, I thought just because of what was and what did transpire that week, I'm going to give it to my boy Drew Brees. Obviously, we all know he broke the record for most passing yards, and not only that, but he did it in the first half of the football game. 363 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, only 2 sacks for almost 32 points. And actually, I'll tell you what, leading into that Monday, I was losing to Devil Raiders. So I wasn't sure what Breeze would do. I mean, it's always nice to have your quarterback when you're down, but sometimes you just never know. But he did it in a fashionable way and was able to get me the win. So hats off to Drew Brees, and an honorable mention that week too. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't announce that Tom Brady entered the 500 touchdown passing club as well. So
Right.
congrats to both those guys, and we'll see what happens. I know Breeze is probably in that 500 club now, so yeah, we'll look forward to see what other records can be broken. But that's week 5. Enough of that.
Mhm.
Now we're into week 6, the true essence of the podcast. Randy, I think I'm going to shift it to you.
Okay.
Why don't you start us off? What week 6? Recap the matchup of the week in your eyes.
Okay, my matchup of the week, probably pretty obvious. You might even have it as well. Is the Bears versus the bottom feeders. Uh, Not just because the Bears is, at least at the time, was the only undefeated team, and it's always nice to see who's going to knock in, give them that first notch. Uh, this week was a bit of a contrast from week 5. There were a lot of close games in week 5, but a lot of blowouts in week 6. So pretty much anything that was within 10 points, as this game was about an 8-point difference. Any game that's reasonably close is a game of the week. And this one went down to Monday night as well. But I especially like how both the quarterbacks were playing well. I think everyone was really excited to watch that Sunday night game. Uh, where I found that the Bears, who ended up losing, I don't know if everyone knows. I'm sure everyone has checked by now. Where he went wrong, he obviously had 3 great players playing. Obviously, Kamara was on the bye, and that really hurt. But Latavius Murray had a big game. He still couldn't. He still couldn't quite bring enough depth into it. Being carried by 3 big players is one thing. And it's good enough to get you 104 points, which was pretty good, despite the. But then you found that Dylan, the bottom feeders, like everybody seemed to show up to play on his team, and that really helps. They add up a lot faster than you think, and you don't have to rely on 1 or 2 guys getting a touchdown here or there. Everybody chips in. On the rankings, I always preach about a well-rounded team, and this is a case where a well-rounded team beat really a team of all-stars, where only 3 guys showed up.
Yeah, no, it was. It definitely was an exciting matchup. Again, Mahomes, he's doing what we've been talking about all year. But he was projected for 28, so he goes above his projection by 8 points. Let's say he gets his projection just alone on that effort. That's a win for the Bears, right then and there. And you can say whatever happened on Monday night, but I know the last touchdown pass Mahomes threw was a 75-yarder. So that in itself, from a quarterback's perspective, is 9 points.
Yeah.
So there's your win. So it's very interesting how close this matchup was. I agree with you. The Bears got let down by a few of their normal depth, but c'est la vie, and he's got to prove next week. He's got a tough matchup against global warming, and we'll see where that goes. But 5-1, still positioned pretty good.
Yeah.
But for me, interestingly enough, and this is a different way of looking at it, for my matchup of the week, I have Jägermeisters versus Misfits, and mostly based on the fact that I do have to announce publicly in recording that congrats to you on the newest record holder of the biggest margin of victory in our league, 102 points. So again, congrats. So that's why I had to give you matchup of the week. I mean, I just praised a guy for breaking records. We got to praise guys who break records in our league. He just had an all-around dominant performance. I know you didn't get the highest point total this week. That did go to global warming. But you did have the biggest dominance based on your victory. I mean, you're set up pretty good when your defense and your kicker spots get you 43 points.
For sure.
And that was huge for you. Not only to mention Matt Ryan finally he's putting up the numbers that we all know he can, and you just had all around nothing too outside of that. Your depth players came to play. I just think everything flowed for you. Unfortunately for the Misfits, just a horrendous week. But who knows how they'll shake down. But for me, just based on that, you got to give nod to matchup of the week for that for breaking that record. So that's matchup of the week for me. The bust, however, so the bad news was Old Dirty Bastards versus Devil Raiders. Now,
Okay.
I know Kelly's probably not listening to these anymore because it seems like every week he's in the either bust or the player bust. But until there's something done differently, you have to put him here. 89 to 61 for Jake. So not an entertaining matchup to say the least. Interestingly enough, had he played anybody else, mostly Jake would have lost as well. A lot of guys put up huge points in their wins who did win. Um, and you got a feel for the Devil Raiders here. I just got a few notes. They had 5 guys on injury who were questionable, maybe didn't return. Cooper Kupp got taken out again. As for Old Dirty Bastard, I mean, again, lucky to be playing Kelly, but now he has his own issue. Dante Freeman is going to be placed on the IR, so that's going to be interesting moving forward. And how does that hinder him in the running back or flex position? But luckily for him, he does have Tavon Coleman, so we'll see how that works out for him.
Yeah, that's right. Hopefully his volume goes up. Coleman's, that is.
Oh, for sure. And Ben's doing what he's been doing. I mean, he's one of the elite quarterbacks right now in the league too, based on passing yardages plus touchdowns. He had a great game against Cincinnati. What a final drive! But sometimes Ben is up and down, and if he can just structure a more steady performance out of that, then he does have one piece of his roster that Jake doesn't really need to worry about. And we talked about a quarterback controversy potentially between Ben and Wentz for his roster, but I think he's got to like what Ben's doing here. So good things for Old Dirty, turning it in at 3-3. He's hanging on to that 8th spot. Got the win against the Devil Raiders, which, I mean, unfortunately for Kelly, but for Jake, that's a win you got to get, and he made it happen. So not too entertaining. So bust of the week for me.
Okay, that sounds good. I went with a completely different direction. I'm going to talk about a game you've already talked about. My worst matchup of the week is Jägermeisters versus Misfits. Now, of course, I thank you for giving me props on the big win. I couldn't do it alone, and unfortunately, that's the reason why this is my worst matchup of the week. Everything went right for me, but everything went wrong for Nigel and the Misfits. Like you said, almost everything went right. I checked, and even on my bench, I came very close to maxing out my lineup. Like if I started LaShawn McCoy instead of Lamar Miller, I would have gained 2.3 points. So, big deal. Wouldn't have made a difference anyways. And unfortunately for Misfits, his two best scorers were on the bench. That added up to 28 extra points. Still not enough to get close, but it at least is not quite as embarrassing. If he starts Hogan over Cooper, that's another 7.8 points. But I will make the statement, I wouldn't have started any other lineup. That's exactly how I would have started it too. We've talked about this unfortunately many times with the Misfits about how he hasn't been able to put very many good weeks together. He's managed to scratch out 2 wins, so he's pretty happy about that, I'm sure. But yeah, this is just one where no one was gifting anybody any wins here, or at least, not on my behalf, and I didn't need to be gifted a win either with the way that turned out.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, and it's just, again, I looked at it from a different perspective that when you win by 102 margin, you can look at that as matchup of the week just based on what a dominant performance that you had, and like you say, sometimes with the bench you're not sure of what matchup you're going to play. You played the right guys and it panned out for you. Yes, you got help from misfortune, but I think everything panned out in a way that you got to give some props to it. So again, congrats on that, and interesting take that you put yourself in the bus. But I get I get the angle you're trying to spin it on. So I'll let you just keep rolling then. Who was your player of the week?
Might be similar to yours, although it might not. My player of the week is right back at Patrick Mahomes for the bottom feeders. I mean, I know going to be like, well, what about Hill and Hunt? Hill got 3 receiving touchdowns. Hunt got a receiving touchdown. And while obviously props to those guys, and they may have even scored equal to or even more than Mahomes. I think they were all in that mid-30 range. But to be perfectly honest, global warming beat Man Bear Pig by 50 points. And if Hill and Hunt just had their average days, he still would have won. But whereas Patrick Mahomes, and we talked about this earlier, that dominating performance managed to get him a win against an undefeated team. So that adds a little bit of extra unseen points on top of the 37 or so that Mahomes put up. It was looking pretty bad in that first half. All he had other than the yardage was 1 interception. But sometimes falling behind in the first half can be a blessing in disguise because you got to really air it out in the second half. And especially with the way the Chiefs are, there are just too many weapons to cover, and you can't focus on the run game. You can't focus on 1 wide receiver or 2 wide receivers. I mean, you wonder why Hill gets open all the time. Well, it's because Sammy Watkins and Travis Kelce, you have to watch them too. And Hunt can make catches out of the backfield as well. So you just can't cover all of them, and someone's going to get open. And the fact that he's not a stationary quarterback means that he can extend plays as well.
Exactly. Yeah, he's we talk about the stats all the time on this kid, and I mean the league knows it as well. And a great start to his starting role career. But what sealed the deal for me is the fact that you're in Foxborough, you lose, or you're losing now because Tom Brady goes down and they throw one in, and now the clock's kind of okay. We have to score because we're down by 4, and he throws just a bullet to Hill. And yes, Hill can fly for 75, but what impressed me the most is this kid is not afraid to make those plays in the moment. And I think had the KC defense been a little bit better, I think KC is going to shock some people here. And yeah, they lost to New England, but look out for them because that team is really legit and can be scary. But we'll see what happens. But Mahomes once again getting the nod, and how can you not, right?
That's right.
For me, it's I got to give it to Jameis Winston. I mean, the guy was
he was my honorable mention as well, just so you know. So yeah, we were on the same page on that one at least.
The guy was suspended for the first 3 games, and we were talking where I admitted I didn't think he's coming back to the starting role. So he gets a nod there. And he ended up getting 39.9 fantasy points, which was the most by any player in Week 6. And that was 15 plus over his projection. Almost 400 yards, 4 passing touchdowns. Just a great performance. And I'll tell you what, Breeze was on the bye. And it was between him, maybe Flacco, and Eli. So my options were kind of limited. I happened to be fortunate enough to be number 1 on the waiver. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to go with him. And had I not, I don't think I would have got the win.
Yeah.
So that's huge for me, not only on what he did fantasy-wise, but for to come in and secure me the win. I got to give credits to Winston. What an unreal week for him to basically say, yeah, this is my team, and we're going to go for it again.
So now that Breeze is back from the bye, what are you going to do with Winston?
I don't know. I know Ryan's looking for a quarterback, but we'll see. So, no, I got to go back to Breeze, and you know that. I think you got to give it.
Yeah, I know that. I'm just wondering if you've had any trade offers, and what the trade might be. Maybe I'll offer you something better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no offers yet, but he is in my roster, so options are open. I'm gonna flip it to the bust here now.
All right.
I'm going to take a page out of your book. Now, I can't remember if you did this position for a player of the week or a bust of the week. But the bust of the week for me was the Chicago Bears defense.
Okay, yeah.
Obviously, we know the Bears own them, which Chicago Bears. But he lost by 8. And Chicago defense only gave him 5 points against Miami. And that was that OT thriller where Miami won. as we all know, the Bears have really shocked not only that division but the league. I think on their defense side of the ball since signing Khalil Mack. They've been dominant all year. They've stopped big teams. I mean, they almost really put the brakes to Green Bay in Week 1 if Rodgers was half human. Um, Now they were projected actually for 8.6 points. So, um, I like that. That could have got them the win, but they didn't do what they were supposed to do against. And it's not like it was Green Bay, Minnesota. I mean, we're talking Miami here. So I'm surprised to see that they actually allowed that many points. And they're fourth in rushing. Like they have the fourth best rushing defense in the league is Chicago.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch the game, and I should have taken some notes, but I'm not really sure how Miami attacked them to get 31 points. If you're the fourth best rushing defense, unless you screw
Yeah.
up for a week, it was kind of curious to see how they allowed 31. And I'm not sure who's Miami's what happened there, but for me, I think that defense let down the Bears in a big way because they've been dominant all year.
Yeah, and the fact that Tannehill was on the shelf, although he hasn't done anything this year, but like really Osweiler, he's the one that burned it, and I don't think we can ask Kelly about this. I don't think Kenyon Drake did anything this week, and Gore, he's been a tank for many years, but I don't think he was, I don't think he was lights out. So it's like I don't know what they did. I don't know what they did to cause this. Like, obviously put up enough points, or maybe just kept the turnovers away, and kept the sacks away. That's probably the only way I can figure. And they
Okay,
get just enough points so that they don't gather any.
well, Kenyon Drake, I just did a little bit of looking here. Kenyon Drake only had 5.8 points, so 57 rush yards and a fumble.
Okay.
So I just think, with an opportunity like that, where again, you kind of shut down their run, where did the 31 come from, and why have you allowed that?
Mm-hmm.
So again, losing by 8, your defense was projected for 8. They've been dominant all year. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Who do you got for bust?
Well, my bust is once again, I'm going to the Devil Raiders for this, and I think I might have mentioned him already once this year, but OBJ, I mean, he's projected for 12 or 13 points every game, and he only gets 4. Obviously everyone and their dog has been talking about, his interview there with Lil Wayne next to him there, and he's talking about how he's not being used as much. He then goes into Carolina and he catches touchdowns, throws touchdowns, pretty much does everything, and you think, okay, now things are fixed. The coach there, what's his name, says the locker room is fine, and now he comes out and he has this game right after. So, as soon as Kelly thinks, okay, OBJ's finally got everything fixed, I can trust him now, he goes and puts up 4.4. And like I said, the door was open to sneak out a win because Jake didn't have that great of a day. He got just under 90 points. There's actually little room if a few of his players do well enough to actually sneak in. Now, of course, it's not terrible news because he did get 10 targets, so he's still getting lots of targets, but he only has one receiving touchdown for the entire season. And
I know. I know.
Obviously, you and I can talk all day, and especially being a Giants fan yourself, we can talk all day about the O-line and how Eli is being forced into game manager mode because he's just checking down all the time. But, his best games, that's OBJ's, his best games of the year have come against Jacksonville, Houston, and Carolina. Not exactly porous defenses if you think about it, so, he's managed to get like a double-digit points in those 3 weeks, so he can do it against tough defenses. Is it motivation? Does he need to play a good defense? Does he need like Ramsey or someone they're talking about him? Is that what he needs to actually do something, or is that what the team needs? I will add one little thing at the end there. They're playing a very depleted Falcons secondary. I believe it's on Monday night.
Yep.
So if he doesn't dominate against a secondary that has both their safeties out, he'll be right back here on Bust of the Week. He's got to dominate this week, you figure.
Well, and that's what we're hoping. Well, that's what fantasy owners are hoping for because, like you say, Every year, his name comes into well, he's got to be in the top three fantasy wideout or top three wide out. But his numbers are just not there this year, and you can say what you want, and it's this big long debate. Is it the O line? Is it Beckham? Is it Eli? Is it whatever? At the end of the day, he's not playing ball either, and he can talk all he wants. I know he drops balls. I know he doesn't run the routes. And the owner actually called him out and said maybe Beckham needs to start playing more football and less talking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the team they've locked him down, and I mean, you can talk again. We can talk about the contract and everything, but you knew what you were buying, and you locked that down. So now you have to try to correct it, or you have to try to figure out a way to get it done. And if anything, Barkley has been so impressive that I don't understand why they're not running play action and getting Beckham.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. Atlanta's secondary is pretty weak with key injuries, but we'll see. I mean, yeah, I don't know, but I get where you're coming from because it's just got to be frustrating having a guy like that and just getting nothing for him. So that's kind of a week 6 recap. But now, if I had a siren, I would alert here because Randy, we have a trade.
Yeah.
We finally have a trade, and now I almost didn't put it through based on the alcohol content. But there's a no, you can't do that. There is a trade. It went through the league office, and it has been official. I've checked their rosters. So, just to recap, in case people haven't known, there was a trade between the bottom feeders and Clueless. So the bottom feeders have traded David Johnson and a 5th round pick to Clueless for Tyler Boyd, Corey Clement, and a 3rd round pick. So, Randy, I'm going to let myself go on this one. So the thoughts I have on this, and then you can rebuttal, argue, agree, whatever you want. This is my breakdown of the trade, and Alan, I know you've been waiting for this, so I hope you listen tomorrow. I think the bottom feeders won this trade.
Okay.
I believe they've gained a more reliable wideout than that they currently have. They've gained an active running back within a Philly system, which has a way better O-line than Arizona could ever imagine they wish they had.
Mm-hmm.
And he gains a 3rd round pick.
Right.
So because of that, you got to think they've already moved ahead in this trade. I mean, so right now, moving this week, unless he makes active changes, he's got Crabtree, Tyler Boyd, who he just acquired, and Demaryius Thomas in the flex. His bench are Randall Cobb on the bye, Valdez Scantling from Green Bay on the bye, and T.Y. Hilton he's decided to keep on the bench. Now, if Adams does what he does for Green Bay, and if Cobb comes back, it's hard to say about Scantling or Cobb because they could just plug and play those guys in that offense.
Right.
So you kind of eliminate those two. T.Y. Hilton has not been getting the love that one would once think that Luck would give him. Demaryius Thomas, yeah, he's got some matchups, but he hasn't really caught anything either from Keenum. I'm not really sure what's going on in Denver. And now you've gained a very active, highly touted wide receiver from Cincinnati. That offense in Cincinnati is starting to move different ways, and it takes the pressure off Green. So I think he did well there. Yeah, he gave up David Johnson, who was his first overall a couple years ago, as we all know. But he gained Corey Clement in a running back, and Corey gets a fair bit of touchdowns in that Philly system in the goal line. Now he's also getting, like I said, the 3rd round pick, and we'll see how that shakes out. Obviously, it depends on where guys end up. I think Clueless, the reason, and here's my Clueless side as to why I think he lost. Did you know that David Johnson has not had a 100-yard rushing game this year?
I think I did see that, yes.
He only has 297 rushing yards over a 6-game period. And okay, so now you're getting that, and you gave up a 3rd round, which is a round where you're most likely for Clueless because he does have a decent roster this year. I can't see him keeping Johnson unless that's his plan. And a 3rd round is a great opportunity to maybe pick up that 3rd running back, a flex player, or whatever, and now you've given that up and you got to wait for the 5th round. Now, it all depends again where these guys end up. So I can't really speak to where these are actually going to take place. These picks.
Right.
But no, I think if I broke it down, I know that night I know Ryan thought it was a decent trade. I know obviously those guys did because they agreed to it. But looking back into the details, it's not a trade involving me. But if I had to decide, as most panels do, I would say that Dylan, he did quite well in that trade.
Yeah, and I would somewhat agree with you. I think it's a little more of a I think it's a little more of an even trade, but I do believe that bottom feeders won a bit more. And like you said, it goes mostly, well, obviously the trade, the draft picks being traded. Obviously, there's an advantage there. And yeah, you do bring up a good point about Corey Clement, and especially with Ajayi on. I believe he's on IR now. I don't know if I think he's done for the year. Is he done for the year? So,
I'm not entirely sure.
so that means that Philadelphia backfield is not. It's not nearly as big of a running back by committee sort of thing, and there isn't a proven running back, a proven veteran running back that helped them win the Super Bowl that's in the lineup competing with them. So he'll get more touches. I'm not sure. Yeah, like you said, he does get touches on the goal line, which is very helpful for running back.
Just to
I don't want to discount David Johnson's value either. I mean, they've got a rookie quarterback, and I think they're getting better at that, so I think his numbers will improve. However, they're never ahead in the game, so there's none of this garbage time runs that he gets, which really hurts his yardage. But I think David Johnson will end up being a bit better of a pick, but you're right. Bottom feeders did win that trade slightly better.
And Ajayi did tear his ACL. He is done for the year.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're right on that injury report. But just interesting, it's exciting. I mean, we're entering week 7, and it's our first trade. It's nice to see some draft picks get tossed in there as well. I think that's a way to kind of sweeten the deal for some guys if they're kind of on the fence. Now, what the viewers might not know, if they've even checked today, we have a secondary trade to announce, don't we, my friend?
We sure do. Yes, we've been.
I'll let you announce it.
People and yeah, we got something worked out.
I'll let you announce the trade to everybody.
All right. Screaming Beavers is sending Chris Thompson, running back for Washington Redskins, to the Jagermeisters in exchange for tight end Cameron Brate of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
And obviously, I think both camps are happy on that. I did offer initial trade with Corey Davis. The bye weeks didn't match up for Jaeger, so he countered offer for Chris Thompson for myself. And at that time, I felt that was appropriate trade. I do. We talked about it on Monday night. I do have a glaring hole at tight end this week. My tight end is on the bye, and I wanted to utilize a trade. To make sure I had a waiver option in case there's last-second injuries, because I also need to do another acquisition later this week. But for me, if I'm to look at the trade, honestly, Winston goes to both those guys, but Brate seems to get some love in the red zone, where Howard kind of gets the love marching the field. So we'll see where that goes, but I needed the tight end, and I'll take that from you, and I'm glad we were able to get a trade done early today. So
yeah, and I guess the other thing, this is what I call a bye week fix for both of us, because week 8 is my terrible bye week, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned that at an earlier podcast when we were talking about bye weeks. I picked up LaShawn McCoy off waivers last week, and that helps me in the running back position, but it still ends up because Zeke and Lamar Miller and also Henry, they all have the same bye week. They all have bye week 8, and I was kind of like, I know I have Nick Chubb on my bench, but he's been an experiment. I've been waiting to see if he'll take the starting job from Carlos Hyde, and that hasn't happened, so I'm not confident plugging him into my starting lineup just yet. Obviously, you have a couple of good. I think you have 3 pretty good running backs on that team ahead of Thompson, who I could have asked for, to try to put the screws to you. But I believe that's where all these garbage trades come from is someone tries to put screws to another guy, and sometimes you just got to say, hey, you know, if the situation was reversed, would I trade Joe Mixon for a tight end? I mean, not unless it was Travis Kelce or something like that, you know. So I said, well, I'll trade the guy who Brian will send me for it, because all I really need him for is to start at running back in week 8. So I don't even need him this week. So
Yeah, no,
my thing, like, you know, these are pretty much just, you know, bye-week plug-in guys, like you said. So there's not that much pressure to trade someone really good. There's not that much pressure to throw a draft pick in to sweeten the deal. This is just a straight one player for one player. And I think even though they play different positions and they may be projected for different points, for the team that gets them, they're of equal value.
I agree with, and that's a great way to look at it, actually. So good. Yeah, great breakdown on that. That's our trades. We're hopefully maybe. I would look forward to maybe evaluating a few more. It's kind of exciting then, and maybe bottom feeders and clueless spark something here in the league. So we'll wait and see. But we got to move on to week 7 here.
Okay.
Who are you predicting will be the matchup of the week?
Oh, I think you'll agree with me on this one. I'm looking forward to the Bears versus global warming.
I am agreeing with you.
Yeah. And like, is this not like the ultimate running back matchup? Like, I've never seen a running back matchup like this as long as I can remember. Like, Barkley slash Kamara versus Gordon slash Hunt. Oh, and you could also possibly, I don't know if the Bears have put him in or not, but you possibly have Latavius Murray versus Mark Ingram as the flex. So you could have 6 very good running backs playing this week. And who cares about the quarterbacks and the wide receivers? These guys are going to get like 2/3 of the points for their respective teams, or at least, you know, you can certainly see it happening.
Oh, absolutely. Currently the Bears has Dalvin Cook in for the flex, but who knows? It's early. But you're right. This is for me the matchup of the week. I think Ryan coming off 165, moving to 3-3, he's starting to get his groove back. Corey gets a loss last week, so he's obviously looking to rebound. But the question remains, will Corey go 0-2? And if there's any week that he will go 0-2, it's this week. Global warming is just, he's got some massive ability to put up some serious points. And I kind of broke it down position-wise. Quarterbacks, Cam Newton versus Stafford. I'm going to slightly give it to Corey just because Cam Newton just offers a bit more mobility and touchdowns than Stafford does. And I know global warming has been looking for some quarterbacks, so I don't think he's going to argue too much on that point. Wide receivers, for me, hands down, it's global warming. Tyreek Hill, Jeffrey, those guys have been putting up Tyreek for sure, serious numbers.
Right.
Running backs, you just touched base. Anybody can do anything. But if I had to give it to a one team over the other, running backs to me go to global warming. I think with Gordon, Hunt, Ingram, and I bet you he's choked, but Connor on the bye, but Ingram's a nice replacement for that option. Tight end, you got Ertz versus Olsen, and they're playing each other too, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it to Ertz. I got to give it to Ryan. But for the kicker, I'm going to give it to Corey with Tucker, just because of what Tucker can do.
Right.
And then the defense, I just slammed Chicago, but I think Chicago's going to come back and play, and Khalil Mack's going to make a statement here. So I'm going to slight advantage to Corey. Now, those categories leave it in a 3-3 tie, but personally, I think global warming will win this matchup just based on what his wide receivers will be able to do as opposed to the Bears.
I agree with you fully. I think that Tyreek Hill is going to be the tiebreaker in all this. However, if he does as well as he's been doing, I don't see where the Bears will be able to make up the ground that global warming will have at the wide receiver position.
For sure. Okay, let's move on to player predictions for week 7, and who is my player of the week that I'm predicting will have a good week for week 7 is your boy Robert Woods.
Okay, I like that idea.
Yeah, well, and here's why. I see you have him in the flex. He's playing San Francisco. He's already projected just shy of 11 points, and San Francisco, I mean, we saw what they did to Green Bay, but I know and you know Green Bay's offense is not the Rams' offense.
Mm-hmm.
And they're playing in San Fran, so they're not in that cold temperature anymore
Yeah.
for both teams. But if Cooper Kupp is out, this is a big advantage for Robert Woods to get back to the what they did against Minnesota, him and Cooks.
That's right.
And
He
I
should
think
get a few more targets that way.
absolutely, and I think he's going to stretch it quite well with the field. San Francisco gives up the 10th most fantasy points to wide receiver positions, and this is going to be an ugly matchup for them to try to control. Even if Cup's in, good luck controlling the three of those guys stretching the field like that. And you got Goff back in sunny California, so he has no choice but to look for an aerial attack. And of course, we all know the weapon they have, which is my boy Gurley. It takes the play action into effect, and the wide receivers can get open. So I'm looking for Woods to probably, he's projected for just shy of 11. I think he potentially has the ability to push to 18 to 20.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
That's possible.
Yep, so that's my player prediction.
Keep my fingers crossed on that stat line.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess must be something with our trade. Must be talking the peace pipe here, because my player of the week prediction is actually one of your boys, so we're kind of patting each other on the back here. And no, not Todd Gurley, who you mentioned, although I'm sure he'll do what he always does, get you big points. It's your boy Drew Brees coming off the bye, and one of the main things is he actually is at 499 for touchdowns, because if you remember last week, that the reason why Peyton kept him in the game was to try to get him that last touchdown. He kept him in until midway through the fourth quarter before he said, okay, yeah, we're going into the bye. You already got one record. Let's just finally rest you. So I think until it happens, and then maybe even afterwards, if they get down to the goal line, they're going to say, forget the running backs. We're going to get that 500 touchdown for Drew Brees. And obviously he's riding high off of it. He had an extra week to kind of refocus, so there's no worry about him, from a record-breaking hangover or anything like that.
For sure,
he's well rested. Kamara and Ingram are still going to be his big running backs. Going to be a big help. I don't see him taking a night off here. I see him continuing his role.
Well, and that's yeah, you're right. I mean, they've just been methodically playing good football, and look for that to continue. But Baltimore's been no slouch. They've controlled a few teams, so it'll be interesting to see how New Orleans works around that. But before we move on, I just want to I want to bring up an honorable mention, because you did say his name. I think another option to look for here that doesn't get a lot of attention is Carlos Hyde. And I think Cleveland needs him to perform, and as a whole, they need to keep going. They're in a division where there's an ability to maybe come to life here, and they're playing Tampa Bay, who gives up the ninth most fantasy points to running backs. I'm going to just quickly, because we don't need to touch on it too long, but I'm thinking look for him for maybe a couple TDs, and if he doesn't get that, then at least 70 to probably 110 yards. I think they're going to push the ball pretty good.
Okay, yeah.
So just a quick shout out there for Carlos Hyde. But who do you think is going to let somebody down? And I hope you don't have somebody on the Devil Raiders, but who do you like? Who's going to be your bust for Week 7?
Well, I'm having a tough time. I was having a real tough time trying to decide who I was gonna pick for this. There aren't a lot of great matchups. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Travis Kelce at Kansas City is going to do that well. I know he didn't have the best of weeks last week. They're playing a pretty good defense in Cincinnati. Not a lot of people are talking about them. This is the Chiefs who are playing Cincinnati. This, like I said, there are too many weapons. He's spreading the ball out. You can't cover Hunt. You can't cover Gordon, or sorry, not Gordon, Tyreek Hill. expected to do well, and sometimes the expectation, um, when the expectation gets too high and you rely on someone, he can be a bust just by not living up to those high expectations.
For sure. No, that's an interesting way to look at it. And Cincinnati's defense has done quite well this year. So again, they're in a tough division that's pretty close. So look for them to try to come out against, well, as we all know, one of the hottest teams in the league. For me, the bust, I did. It was tough to pick one this week. Yeah, I agree with you. It was tough because everybody's kind of floating around where maybe they should be. Like not too crazy numbers. Where you're like, oh, that guy's going to drop down far.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm going to have to say bottom feeders. Sorry, but Alex Collins from Baltimore.
Okay.
I think again, and you touch base that New Orleans is coming off the bye, and Baltimore is obviously playing New Orleans. I think he's maybe going to get a touchdown. If he doesn't get the touchdown, he's going to score. He's going to get less than 90 yards. Now he's projected for 9.9. That's why I came up with 90.
Right.
So he's going to get less than that because New Orleans just stuffs the box. Fourth fewest points to running backs, and we've never talked about the Saints defense.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's because they can't stop the pass.
well, and that's just it. And their offense does so well. We never really focus on the defensive side of the ball because they still get the wins.
That's true.
But if we can have a rush defense where Baltimore is pushing the run, look out because Baltimore, remember, they like to throw Lamar Jackson in there.
Yeah.
So and what does he do? He scrambles out of the pocket or does those little quarterback draw plays and yada yada. So look for New Orleans to stop him and sub projections for bust. So just before we kind of sign off here, we do our Q&A period as well. Is it your turn or mine to go first?
I'm not sure. Well, I'll just go first.
Sure.
I'll ask you first here just to make sure. We've talked a bit about trades. I wanted to talk to you a bit about trading draft picks in particular and what the benefit might be for it. I know our first trade here had a couple draft picks. We talked mostly about the players, but where might trading draft picks be able to make or break a trade? Not just as far as winners or losers, but how can trading a draft pick help make a trade happen instead of being rejected?
Interesting. Well, that's a heavy question because I'll just use an example of Devil Raiders is on every podcast, but hey, Kelly, we love you. He's 0-6 right now. Okay.
Right.
It's going to come up very quickly to the point where there's the point of no return to make the playoffs.
Right.
Now, just because you don't make the playoffs doesn't mean there's guys on your team that nobody doesn't want.
That's right.
This is an opportunity now, before the deadline. Kelly can say, all right, do you want this guy? Because I'm not going to make it. I'll take somebody off your team, but I want to sweeten the deal with what, Randy? Draft picks.
Right.
So this is why our league is so good, is because we have the draft picks. So he's able to move those pieces that people are going to want because guys like, well, anybody in a position probably within the top 5-6 teams are probably looking to push to the playoffs. And obviously our goal there is to win and get cash and obviously bragging rights. Well, to have another piece of the puzzle, to even if you took Beckham off him, for example, you just blasted him. But that's a guy I wouldn't mind having on my roster to look at a matchup between weeks 14, 15, and 16. And if I'm in the
time for him to turn it around, you can sit him on the bench if you want. Like you said, if you're not giving up a player.
Well, and here's the thing. Even if you give up a player to him, he's going to probably say, okay, well, I know you're not going to look at that guy, so why don't we just make the trade but sweeten the deal with draft picks? So Kelly can now load the box with draft picks so that next year he can say, okay, I'm going to be somewhere between 1, 2, 3, 4, like in the middle of our draft, right? Because of our draft order.
Yeah.
Now I can also load up in the middle, and if this guy wins, I'll load up at the end of the round, or hey, maybe he loses first round and gets 5th place, and he wins the consolation, he gets first. Well, maybe I get first overall pick now.
Yeah.
So that's a way to look at draft picks, just simply in that scenario if you're on the outside looking in. Now, if you're on the Bears clueless side of the world, where you're 1 and 2, this is where you now have to say, what type of round would I give up to a guy like Kelly and that player to push me through to the playoffs? Because if it doesn't work out for me, this could really screw me over in the early rounds.
Right.
Because if you win and you give up your first or second round draft picks, or your third, for let's just take the top 3 picks, those are key players. No matter if you're in no matter where you're positioned, you should get a good player in each of those rounds.
Right.
But now you give one up, like we talk about in the bottom feeder clueless trade. You've missed out on an opportunity to game a big name early on to start building that core of your roster. So you have to watch on where you think you're going to be placed, and obviously we're just prognosticators, so we don't know for sure. But draft pick trades are huge, and I think it really, and this is where we talked about before in the off season, is, well, the draft order this, and how come this way and that way? Well, again, we just refer to it. You have to be the GM who actively seeks draft picks. You have to build your roster. And if you understand how they work and who you can move to get picks, sometimes it pans out and you can build your core appropriately. And you might miss out on a round or two or a player, but that's what you might have to do to build up. So for me, draft picks are absolutely crucial to trading and in fantasy. And I think there's 2 ways to look at it, and I hope that answers your question.
That does. That's a very good answer.
Now here's my question to you, and it's based on the NFL.
Okay.
Randy, Indianapolis Colts are currently 1-5.
Mm-hmm.
The division leader is Tennessee, and they're 3-3.
Right.
The New York Giants are 1-5, and Washington is currently 3-2 as the divisional lead, because obviously Washington had the bye week.
Right.
There are a couple other 1-5 teams, but I'm not bringing them in here because the division leaders are so far ahead. So the 2 teams I gave you, which of these 2 teams has the best chance to win their division?
Wow. That's a tricky one. I feel that it's, it's tricky because the key part to that question is win their division. So you got to look at, okay, first thing, who's the weakest division? And some people might say, okay, the AFC South, if Tennessee, who can't seem to put points on the board as the division leader, what's wrong with Jacksonville? How come they're not taking over? And what's wrong with Houston, and how come they don't take over? But at the same time, the Colts might be a better team than the Giants, and you look at the NFC East and you think, well, okay, Washington's ahead, but only because of that bye. They did not look good that last game. Alex Smith looked terrible out there, so you got to think if they did play, they'd probably be 3-3, so they'd be right there with everyone else. Philadelphia had a rough start to the year, but they're starting to pick up, and the Cowboys, well, let's be honest, they absolutely shocked everybody by beating Jacksonville and beating them the way they did. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, which one do you believe? Because you've got Jacksonville, who should be dominating the division, and they're not, mm-hmm. but they're still the same team. Obviously, short Fournette, and I think even Yeldon is kind of banged up now. So, are they going to be able to come back from that with their defense? Are the Cowboys going to be able to continue without any receivers of note? But I think the main one, so it's really hard to determine which division is worse. My first thought would be the NFC East, but then what if the Eagles improve? So it's kind of, I think it would be the Colts, because they've been in some close games, some good overtime games, and it's really hard to say, but I think I would have to go with the Colts. The Giants, I've said before, we've talked many times about their O-line, and they're having trouble. You can't win any games with an O-line that gives up much, and especially with a quarterback who doesn't move like he used to. Barkley's going to do what he's going to do what he can, but I think the Colts have a better chance. They're just a slightly better team.
Okay. No, and I'm not going to argue that. I just found it very interesting that the other 1-5 teams are Oakland, but they're with Kansas City, and I don't think Kansas City's going to slow down enough that, or Oakland get good enough.
Yeah,
Um, Arizona and San Fran are 1-5, but they're with the Rams, and Rams are undefeated, and I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But the other two are very interesting when the division leader is basically 500.
that's right.
And two more games and this, that, and the other makes it interesting. So I just thought I'd get your take on that. And I know your team is in the NFC East, and maybe there's a little bit of bias there, but there's also bias there too for me to say, yeah, I think they can do it. But we're going to have a very interesting matchup this week between Dallas and Washington.
Yes.
And that's going to dictate what happens here because that makes a little bit of a spread. And if the Giants can't beat the Falcons like you stated, then next week I won't ask you that question because I know the story's over.
Yeah.
But one of the Washington Dallas teams will be losing.
Yeah.
So if Washington wins, well, now that gap becomes a little bit bigger just based on the fact they've already had a bye week. But no, I thought that was an interesting to see 1-5 still potentially have a chance to grasp their division.
Right. And you'll notice I didn't say the Cowboys would win the division either. I'm leaning more towards the Eagles than even the Cowboys. I'm worried about my team there in the NFC East as well.
Well, that's the summary of Week 7 with Q&A, a couple trade alerts, and we had to recap on Week 5. So this one did go a little bit longer than anticipated, but we appreciate you guys listening in to recap everything. We put a lot of time into this, and I know a few of you on Wig Night said you were looking forward to seeing the breakdown of the trade and a few other things. So we appreciate that you guys listen in on this, and it's fun for us, and hopefully it's fun for you guys too. So Randy, anything else you want to add before we kind of go? Any games you want to watch or anything else you want to say?
The only really one I want to watch is Cincinnati and Kansas City on Sunday Night Football, just because that's the most evenly matched teams with the two best teams in them. I think there will be a few blowouts this week.
Yeah, and I think that'll be yeah. There probably will be a few blowouts. Yeah, I'm looking at that game too. Obviously, I want the Giants to win, but from a hey, you need to watch that. It's not one you need to watch. We'll be forced to watch it, but it's. I'm looking forward to just be. I will tell you this. I'm looking forward to Dallas Washington. I want to know who wins that because if Dallas wins that, I think it makes it very interesting at the top of that division.
It certainly would.
All right, well, that's it for this week. We'll get her uploaded soon. We appreciate you guys bearing with us for a longer one, but we're looking forward to what is for week 7. So take care, guys, and have a good week.
Have a good week, boys.